Welcome back, my favorite Python programmers, to a brand new video, and in this one we're going to be looking at 2 quizzes and 1 quick tip about inheritance. So we're going to be looking at this quiz right here, which will test our knowledge in functions and what happens when you have default parameters and when you explicitly define arguments. We're going to be looking at list slicing and what this is going to give us. And finally, we're going to be looking a little bit into inheritance when it comes to working with object-oriented programming in Python. But before we get into that, a quick word from our sponsors. And I'm just joking, I don't have any sponsors, it's just me. This is my message, so please check it out. If you're serious about leveling up your Python skills, let me tell you about what I do outside of YouTube. I've been teaching Python for over 5 years now, and I run a Python teaching institute where we help students go from complete beginners to absolute masters with a curriculum that focuses on practical application and building real-world skills. All the lessons are one-on-one and they are personalized just for you. This tailored approach ensures that you'll start seeing improvement within just 2 weeks, and by the 10th week you'll be on your way to mastery. And it's not just Python either. We dive into SQL, machine learning, and you'll graduate with over 5 portfolio projects to help you stand out to your employers. Oh, and for young learners, we also have a super fun Scratch program that starts with Scratch coding and gradually introduces Python through game development projects. So if you feel that this is something that you want to reach your goals faster, or you have someone that you love that you want to give them this opportunity to, or some younger kid, maybe yours, maybe someone else's, that you want them to learn Python and coding properly from a young age, make sure to reach out to me via WhatsApp on the number that I'll leave right here or in the description, or you can do the same by sending me an email to the email that I will leave somewhere around here or also in the description. Thank you so much, and let's get started with today's lesson. All right, with that annoying guy out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. So first of all, what I'm going to do, just like I always do, I'm going to comment out the actual result just to print out the different options. So pause the video, take your time, check what happens, and get back to me and tell me what you find. All right, time's up because obviously you can pause at any time. So what is happening in here? First of all, we are defining a function that is the calc underscore function. And whenever you see something like this, where the parameters of your function take in a value or you set them as a value, it doesn't mean that x will always be equal to 1 or y will always be equal to 2. It means that by default, if these parameters are not sent to the function, that means that they are going to take on these default values. This is done in case you have a function where you never want to have empty parameters or empty arguments being used inside, in case somebody forgets to send in these parameters. Inside of this function, we have x is equal to x plus y. For those that know, you could have said x plus or plus equals y, which would have been the same, but I'm just doing this exactly what we've done right here, where we said y plus equals 1. Now, it's better to use y plus equals 1 only when there's an integer being added. When it's like this, it's not very useful, but yeah. Next and finally, we print out x comma y. So we're printing these two out. And what we're doing in here is we're trying to calculate the function, and we're sending in the y equals 2, x equals 3 to the calc function. Now, for some of you out there that know what is going on in here, this is called explicitly setting the arguments. Usually, whenever you see a function like this, it looks something like, for example, y equals, for example, right here 2, and then right here you have, for example, just 3. So this is how you usually work with a function. But sometimes you want to define specific arguments. So you want to say that I want y to be equal to 2 and I want x to be equal to 3. Of course, we could have switched it up, but this is part of the question. So we have 2 things that we're learning: defining a function with default parameters and explicitly setting the arguments of a function. So what do you think the output is going to be? Well, if we look right here, the big confusion that happens is Of course, y is equal to 2, y is equal to 2, that's all good. The confusion happens is x going to be equal to 3 when used inside, or is it going to be equal to 1? Well, the only time that you use the value that you've set in the default parameter is when x is not provided. Like for example, in a case like this one, where you only have y equals 2, but you don't have x equals to anything. In that case, x will be equal to 1 and that value will be used inside of our function. But since we have, remember this one is commented out, since we have x being set as a value, it means that x is going to be equal to 3. So what we'll have in here is we'll have x equal to 3 plus 2, which will give us an answer of, let's just say right here, 3 plus 2, which is 5, and then we'll have y plus equals 1, so it's going to be 3, so we should have an answer of 5, 3, so it's E. If I right click and I run, there we go, we get 5 and 3. Alright, let's continue on, and now let's look at this one. What I'm going to do is I'm going to comment this out, I'm going to run this so that you can see the different possible answers, and I'm going to give you a bit of time to find a solution to this. Trust me, take your time, this is not easy. A lot of students fell into traps right here, including me, by the way. First time I looked at it, I was like, yeah, this is the answer. Then upon closer inspection, it turns out it's something different. So pause the video, try to find the answer. 3, 2, 1. Let's go ahead and break it down. First of all, we have my list that contains 3 items, 1, 0, and 2. Then we have a, b, c equals to my list, and we'll get back to what this actually means. Then we have my list with this slice. So if you've never seen slicing, I highly recommend that you actually go through the private curriculum, because we delve deep in the private course, because we delve deep in the curriculum into slicing, working on strings, then on lists, and how important it is, especially when you start machine learning. So what do we have in here? Usually when we are doing slicing, we specify the start, the stop, and then the step. We can not specify the step, so it defaults to 1. But in this case, as you can see, we did not specify the start, nor did we specify the stop. And that is because when you don't specify the start or the stop, if you don't specify the start, it just starts at the very beginning of your list or iterator. If you don't specify the stop, then it will go until the end. But, very important, because we're using a negative step, it means that these two are flipped. So this becomes the stop and this one becomes the start. I know, it's crazy, but because we're flipping it, because we're using a negative step, this is what happens. So now the result of this is going to be my list actually becomes equal to the following. So it becomes 2, 0, and 1, right? And then we do some unpacking right here, which means that A will take in 2, B will take in 0, and C will take in 1. And since we're using B right here, I'm going to just write down that B is equal to 0, right? And keep in mind, whenever you're doing this unpacking, you need to make sure that the number of variables on the left side or behind the equal sign is equal to the number of items inside of your iterator, or in this case, your list. So once we have B equals as 0, we have my list at position B. Now, this is the most crucial part. This is where 90% of students stumble. And this is where it tricked me as well, by the way. So what do we have in here? We have my list at position B. And you're thinking, all right, B equals 0. It's the first index. It's 2. The answer is 2. Excellent. But what if I told you that you're wrong? Because even though we flipped the list right here, we didn't actually set it. So the list stayed as it in its original form. Now, right here, this is for me just to highlight to you, but it didn't actually change. This is just a copy of this list, right? The original one stayed the same. So when I access my list at position B, the answer will be 1. So when I right click and I run, there we go, I get 1. All right, all good. If you have any questions about this, please let me know in the comments below. And now let's get to inheritance. So what do we have in here? We are now working with object-oriented programming, which is the most important section in the entire curriculum that I usually teach. It's the most important section in any coding language that you're learning, because you need to understand how object-oriented programming works. So first of all, right here, we've defined a class. And again, if you don't know what a class is, you know the drill. You need to understand what it is, or you can even watch a video that I've posted right here. I will link it somewhere at the top. So we've defined a class person, and we've defined the constructor right here that takes in the self, first name, last name. I'm not going to delve into every single detail, like for example, what the self is. I teach it in one of the videos and in my course. Then we have the first name, last name, and we set the attributes right here to the values that are being sent. And we've simply defined this __str that will allow us to print out the person. Now, on the side, or the next class that we've created, is the class student. And the student inherits from person right here. So this person, or this student, has the same attributes as the person and the same functionalities as the person, but we've inherited from the person because we want to add to it. And this is the tip that I'm talking about, because when you're creating your code, at some point it starts to get bigger and bigger, and you want specific attributes to certain, let's say, objects in your code. So you don't want person to have student ID, for example. Maybe you have something other than a person, other than a student, I mean. Maybe you have a teacher, and the teacher shouldn't have a student ID. They should have a teacher ID. So you would create a class that is teacher that inherits from person. Or maybe, for example, you want students that are in, I don't know, in the math class. So what you'd do is you'd create a class, math students, that inherits from students. So now math students will have a first name, last name, student ID, the major, and I don't know, their math ID or their math qualification or something. I don't know what math students have. So that is the use, and that is the tip that I'm teaching you, and that is inheritance is very, very effective. Now in here, the student class has its own constructor. It takes in the first name as well, the last name, and on top of that, a student ID and a major. And this is the crucial line right here, the super.init. And what this does, if I hover over it, will it tell me the super same unbound? Okay, it doesn't really explain in simple terms. I'll tell you in simple terms. Basically, this calls the constructor of the class from which my current class inherits. So the student inherits from person. So when I say super.init, this init, by the way, look, when I double click on it, the init in the person is highlighted. When I double click on the init right here, the one at the top is not highlighted. So this one is the same as this one right here. And I send in the first name and the last name that were sent to me as a student. I send them to the person to set them at the top. And I also set my own attributes, which are the student, the major, and I can also add attributes that were not sent, like the grades. So now the grades are set right here. I also defined a function for the I've defined a function that would allow me to add grades to students. So the person class does not need a grade, right? Because let's say a teacher inherits from the person. The teacher shouldn't have any grades. So you can start seeing the functionality and the usefulness of using inheritance. And in this case, we simply send in the course and a grade, and we set the values of our grade dictionary right here. And we also look at an example. So we've created a student that has the first name Mike, the second name or the last name Olsen, the student ID is 1234, and the major is computer science. And then we give Mike a grade on CS 101, which is computer science 101. We give him an A, and in math 2200, I'm not good at math apparently, and we give him a grade of B. Now the cool thing about this, if I right click and I run, I shouldn't get anything. But the cool thing about this is I can actually do the following. I can say student, which was the student object that we created right here. and I can simply print that student out. And look at what I get, Mike Olson. Now you might think, where does this come from? Well, it actually comes from this underscore underscore str. And just to prove it, I'll say hey right here, just as an extra. And it says hey at the end. Even though this underscore underscore str is not created inside of the student, when I call, remember, student is from the class student with an uppercase S. Even though the underscore underscore str is not in the student class, I can still use it even though it's in the person class. So inheritance, super important. If you want an in-depth look, I've linked the video. If you want to understand slicing properly, functions default values, if you want to delve deep into everything, I highly recommend that you join the course and the curriculum that I have. If you just want to learn surface level stuff and still get incredible value, you can watch the videos that I have on my channel. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope that you learned something. Comment below what you want me to cover next. If you have any questions, I always answer everyone because I barely have like 1K subscribers. Most of the views, it's gonna be about 500. If I get 500, I'll be very happy. So any questions that you ask in the comments, I will definitely answer. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one. Bye bye.